He came up the cobbles in a paste crown and a velvet cape, threw his arms wide in front of 40 phones, and announced to the whole forecourt that he was the king now, and that I was to lower my weapon and bow. I did not move. Behind that face the cameras called a statue. I was already counting the distance from his hand to the rifle, the seconds to the corner post, the exact word I would say if he reached for the only thing on that gate I would never let a stranger touch. My name is Corporal Aldis Bren, and I have stood the card gate of Harrowmere House for 11 years. People think the hard part is the standing. It isn't. The hard part is the watching, the long, patient arithmetic of a man who has trained himself not to react, but never, not for 1 second, to stop measuring. That morning I had measured 3 coach parties, a lost delivery driver, and a gull that wanted my shako. Then the man in the paste crown arrived, and the arithmetic changed. He was perhaps 30, well-fed, dressed for a part. The crown was gilt cardboard with glass jewels. The cape was the kind they sell 2 streets down beside the snow globes. He had an ermine collar that was clearly a bath mat, and a scepter that was a curtain rod with a tennis ball glued to the end. None of it was a crime. A man may dress as a king on a public footpath, and he may even be funny doing it, and I have seen better impersonators than him earn an honest laugh and move along. The crowd around him was laughing already, phones up, that bright greedy hush of people who think they are about to watch something happen. "On your knees, soldier," he said in a voice pitched to carry. "Your king commands it." I gave him exactly what I give everyone who tries that line. Nothing. Eyes forward, chin level, the rifle at my shoulder, the white glove still. The stillness is not an absence. It is the loudest thing I own, and I have learned to let it answer for me. He waited for the laugh, got it, and grew bolder, the way that kind always does when the silence rewards them instead of stopping them. "He won't even look at his king," the prankster told the phones, walking a slow circle just inside the chain that marks where the public stops and my post begins. "That's treason, isn't it? Somebody arrest this man. Where are my guards? Where is my loyal?" He turned the curtain-rod scepter on me like a wand. "Kneel, kneel for the crown." A child near the front laughed because everyone was laughing. An older man in a flat cap did not laugh. He was watching me the way you watch a kettle. I marked him as the kind who knew where this could go. I marked the chain, too, the simple brass link barrier on its little posts, the line the prankster had not yet crossed. As long as he stayed behind it, he was a man doing a bit, and my job was to be the wall the bit broke against. Discipline is mostly knowing where the line is, and trusting it to do its work before you ever have to. He crossed it on the 3rd lap. He did it lightly, the way a man steps over a garden hose, ducking under the brass chain with a flourish of the cape so the crowd would think it part of the act. "A king goes where he pleases," he announced. Now he was on my cobbles inside the space that is not a stage. The laughter wobbled. Some of the phones lowered an inch. The man in the flat cap took half a step forward and stopped himself. I still did not move because a man crossing a chain is not yet a man who has touched the post or the sentry or the weapon, and the difference between those things is the whole of my trade. But the arithmetic sharpened. Hand to rifle, a long pace and a reach. Word to the post, instant through the box at my back. Distance to him if he made it real, shorter than he understood. I let none of it show. I have a face for exactly this, and I wore it. "Smile for the kingdom," he said, leaning close enough that I could smell the cheap face paint, and lifted his phone for a photograph with his arm around my shoulders, as if I were a thing bolted to the wall for tourists to pose against. His shoulder brushed the metal ribbon over my heart. That ribbon is not decoration. It is 2 friends in a winter I do not discuss with strangers in paste crowns. I have held against worse than a bath mat collar. "Boring," he declared, when the photo did not make me his prop. The crowd's laughter had thinned to the nervous kind. He could feel it slipping, and a man performing for a crowd will do almost anything to get the laugh back. I watched his eyes do the thing I had been waiting 11 years worth of mornings to never see and always expect. They went from my face to my hands, from my hands to the rifle. "You know what would be the best photo," he said, and his voice dropped the king act for one honest, grasping second. "Give me the gun, just for the picture. Come on, just one." "Step back from the post." My voice, the first I had spoken, low, flat, carrying exactly as far as it needed to and not 1 inch farther. It is not a shout. I have never shouted on that gate. A shout is for men who have lost the line. I had not lost the line. I was naming it out loud once, the way the standing orders require, the single clear warning a man gets before the world stops being a game. He laughed. That was his mistake, though he would not understand it for some minutes yet. He laughed and he reached. His hand closed on the barrel of my rifle just below the bayonet lug, and he pulled, grinning back at the phones, sure that the statue would yield the prop because statues always yield in the videos he had watched, the ones where nothing real ever happens and the joke is always safe. He had built his whole morning on a world where the gun is a costume too. It is not a costume, and what happened next was not the video he wanted. I will tell you exactly what I did, because the crowd could not see it cleanly and the phones caught only the blur, and a wrong story has a way of outrunning a true one. I did not strike him. I did not so much as raise my voice past that one low order. What I did was older and quieter than that, and it was over before the nearest phone had finished focusing. I rotated the weapon, not away from him, into the lock my hands have made 10,000 times in the dark, the rifle drawn tight to my body where no pull on earth would tear it loose, the muzzle turned to the safe ground of the cobbles, every part of it accounted for and controlled. His grin held for a half-second after his grip had already failed. Then his fingers were sliding on steel that simply would not come, and the cape that had been a costume of power tangled the arm it was draped over, and the man who had been a king for 90 seconds stumbled forward into a space that no longer had any give in it at all. And from the corner of the forecourt, where I had clocked them the moment the crown first came up the cobbles, 2 of my own began to move. People imagine a guardsman stands his gate alone. We do not. The man you see is the visible point of a thing with depth. A post, a corner watch, a sergeant on a radio, a duty room behind a door you would walk past without a glance. I had touched the small brass contact inside the sentry box the instant the prankster's eyes had slid to my hands, before he ever reached, because the order I would have to give was already on its way to becoming a fact, and a fact does not wait for a man's permission. By the time his fingers were sliding off the barrel, the corner watch was 3 strides out and closing, and the sergeant was already in the doorway, and the morning had quietly stopped being his. He did not feel it yet. That is the strange mercy of the thing. He still thought he had the crowd. He let go of the rifle, was made to let go, though to the phones it would look like he simply released it, and he raised both hands and spun to face his audience with the bright, wounded grin of a man whose joke has been spoiled by a poor sport. "Did you see that?" he appealed to them. "Did you see he grabbed at me, this toy soldier actually?" "Sir," the sergeant's voice. Sergeant Maurice Cole, 14 years on this gate before they made him senior, a man who has the rare gift of sounding bored at the exact moment everything matters. "Step away from the corporal. Keep your hands where I can see them." "I'm the king," the prankster said, and a few people still laughed, but it was the last of the laughter and he could hear it dying. It's just a bit, mate, lighten up." "You laid hands on a serving guardsman's weapon at a royal post," Cole said, in the same flat tone he might use to read out a parking notice. "That's not a bit." I want to be honest about what I felt, standing there with my rifle locked to my body, and the man's face going from performance to confusion in front of 40 lenses. I did not feel triumph. I have never once felt triumph on that gate, and any guardsman who tells you he savors the moment a fool steps over the line is a guardsman I would not stand beside. What I felt was the cold, clean relief of arithmetic resolving. The line held, the warning given, the weapon controlled. No blow struck, no one hurt. The thing contained inside the exact dimensions the standing orders had drawn for it years before either of us was born. That is the whole of what we are for, not to win. To hold the shape of the world steady, while a foolish man finds the edge of it. The corner watch reached us. 2 guardsmen, Treller and young Sabine, who had been on the gate a year and whose face I watched out of long habit to see whether he would tighten up. He did not. He stepped wide and behind, exactly as drilled, taking the prankster's escape line without ever once making it a shove. We do not shove. A shove is a thing a camera loves and a magistrate questions. We close space. We make the room around a man smaller and smaller until the only sensible thing left for him to do is what we are asking. You can't touch me, the prankster tried. I haven't done anything. I'm an entertainer. I've got 2 million followers. I do this at landmarks all over. Then you'll know better than most where the line is, Cole said. Hands behind your back, please. This is going on the internet, he said, and there was the first real fear under the bluster now, the understanding arriving in pieces. This is going viral. You'll lose your jobs over this. Do you know who I? We know exactly what you are, I said. It was the second time I had spoken, and I had not planned to, and I said it not to wound him, but because it was simply true, and the truth, said once and quietly, does more than any shout. He was a man who had built a career on the certainty that nothing he did at a real post was real, that the gun was a prop, the guard was a statue, the line was a suggestion, and the whole solemn apparatus of duty existed as a backdrop for his content. He had walked up to the one gate in the kingdom where every part of that was wrong, and he had reached for the one object that turns a prank into a matter the law takes with both hands, and he had done it grinning, on camera, for the world. The flat-capped man at the front lowered his phone. He had been filming, I realized, but not for sport. I've got all of it, he said to Cole plainly, from the first crossing of the chain. If you want a witness, I'm your man. Saw him reach for the weapon clear as day. The corporal never raised a hand. That is the thing the prankster had not counted on, and the thing his kind never count on. A crowd is not one animal. It is 200 people, and some of them came to laugh, and some of them came to watch a man test a wall, and a few of them, the flat caps, the old soldiers, the mothers with a sharp sense of what is fitting, came having already decided whose side the truth was on. The video that would go around the world was not going to be the one he had been making. It was going to be the one the flat-capped man held, steady and unbroken, in which a costumed stranger crosses a chain, ignores a clear order, and closes his hand on a soldier's rifle. And the soldier does not flinch, does not strike, does not so much as turn his head until the words "step back from the post" leave him level as a spirit levels bubble. They cuffed him there on the cobbles. Plastic restraints, hands behind the back, the cardboard crown knocked askew and then off entirely, rolling to the gutter where a gull did finally claim something that morning. The cape, without a king inside it, was just a length of cheap red velvet, and the bath mat collar was just a bath mat, and the curtain-rod scepter lay where he dropped it with the tennis ball already coming unglued. Stripped of the laugh, the costume was exactly what it had always been, and now everyone could see it. I want a lawyer, he said, and that at last was the most honest thing he had said all morning. You'll have one, Cole told him. Walk. They walked him off toward the duty room door, the door the tourists never notice, and the crowd parted for them in that uneasy, sobered way a crowd has when the show turns out to have been real after all. Sabine stayed wide on the flank the whole way, textbook, and I saw Cole give him the smallest nod, the kind that does not exist for any camera, the kind that says you held. And then the door closed, and the forecourt was just a forecourt again, and there was one fewer king in the world than there had been 10 minutes before. I returned the rifle to my shoulder. I squared my feet on the worn place in the cobbles where 11 years of my own boots have left a pale shadow of a man. I set my eyes forward on the middle distance over the heads of the crowd, where I keep them, and I let the stillness come back down over me like a coat I had only briefly set aside. But it was not over. It is never over at the moment the fool is led away. That is only the moment the easy part ends. By the time my watch ended that afternoon and I had handed the gate to the relief, the prankster's own footage was already loose in the world, and it had been cut. He had a man back at his hotel, a producer, a partner, I never learned which, who had clipped the recording down to 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds the story was exactly the one he had wanted to tell. It opened on the rifle already moving, my hands already locked, his body already stumbling, and a caption across it in screaming letters: RoyalGuard attacks harmless prankster. No chain, no crossing, no order, no reach for the weapon. Just 4 seconds of a soldier appearing, to anyone who knew nothing, to manhandle a man in a paper crown. I learned about it the way I learn most things now, which is from the duty sergeant turning a screen toward me with no expression on his face at all. The clip had 2 million views before the sun went down. By the next morning it had 11 million, and there were people I had never met and never would, in countries I have never seen, who knew my name and had decided I was a thug in a costume of my own, that the discipline was a pose, the medals were dress-up, and the rifle was just a longer version of the curtain rod. I will tell you that it did not move me the way you might think. I am 51 years old. I stood this gate when there were no phones at all, and then through every stage of there being more of them, and I have watched the same shape of thing happen enough times to know it has a rhythm. The lie is fast and the truth is slow, and the only question that has ever mattered is whether the slow thing is * true. Whether, when every frame is finally laid end to end, the man on the gate did exactly what the gate required and not 1 degree more. I knew the answer to that before the prankster's grip had even failed. So I drank my tea, and I cleaned my kit, and I let the world have its fast, wrong day, because the slow, right one was coming, and I had the rare advantage of knowing it. Here is the thing I think about, in the quiet between coach parties, that I have never told a soul until now. The rifle is not a prop. I have said that, but I want you to understand why I would let a man insult me, brush my medals, lean his face into mine, call me a toy and a statue and a poor sport in front of the whole world and never once break, and then move the instant his hand closed on the weapon. It is not pride. It is not even the law, though the law is clear. It is that I once knew what it costs when a weapon goes where it should not, and the ribbon over my heart is the receipt. Long before the gate, before the guilt and the bearskin and the tourists, I served in a place I do not name to people in paste crowns. I was young and certain, the way the prankster was certain, that the rules around a weapon were the boring part, the dull scaffolding around the exciting work. And then a friend of mine, a careful man, the most careful man I knew, handed his rifle for 1 foolish, friendly second to a third party who wanted, of all things, a photograph, just a picture, just a moment. And in that moment the careful chain of who controls, what broke and what followed broke 2 families and a winter I have already told you I do not discuss. No villain, no malice. Just a weapon that went, for 1 second, where it should not have, because everyone in the circle assumed someone else had the line. I have never assumed anyone else has the line since. On my gate, I have the line. The rifle does not leave my control for a photograph, or a joke, or a king, or a friend, because I have already paid the full price of finding out what is on the other side of that 1 careless second, and the bill does not come due to the man who reaches. It comes due to the one who let go. So when the world spent its 11 million views deciding I was a brute who could not take a joke, I felt no need to argue, because the people calling me that had been lucky enough never to learn what I had learned. I did not begrudge them the luck. I only knew they were wrong, and that the gate did not require their understanding to keep doing its work. The gate has never once asked to be liked. The slow, true day came, as it always does. Within 48 hours the flat-capped man's footage was loose too, the full thing, unbroken, 93 seconds of it, posted with no scream of capitals, just a plain line. Here is the whole of it. Watch the chain. Watch his hand. Watch the soldier. And the people watched the whole of it, and the whole of it told a different story than 4 cut seconds could. You could see the crossing of the chain. You could see 3 slow laps of escalation. You could see the curtain rod aimed at my face, the arm slung around my shoulder, the lean into the metals, and through all of it a man standing so still he might have been part of the gate. And then you could see his eyes go to my hands, and his hand go to the rifle, and you could hear the flat-capped man had been close enough to catch it. The single low order, step back from the post, given once before anything else happened at all. And the world, which had been so sure, turned over in a day. It is a humbling thing to watch. The speed with which a crowd that has decided a man is a villain will decide instead that he is the opposite. And I take no more pride in the second verdict than I did wound from the first, because both were a crowd guessing at a man it had watched for 4 seconds or 93, and neither knew the first true thing about why he did what he did. But the second verdict had this in its favor. It matched the gate. It matched the orders. It matched the slow, dull, unglamorous truth that the rifle does not leave my hands, and that everything I did flowed from that one fixed point and went no further. The prankster, meanwhile, had stopped being a king and started being a defendant, and that is a part of the story the cut clip never shows because it is not 4 seconds long. It is months long, and it is boring, and it is exactly where the consequence of a careless second actually lives. He had not, it turned out, done this only once. The flat-capped man's footage had loosened more than one tongue, and within a week there were 3 other recordings from 3 other landmarks, in 3 other cities, posted by people who had filmed the same act and felt, watching what had happened on my gate, that they ought to say something. In each one, the same man in some version of the same costume crossed some version of a line and reached for something he had been told not to touch, a ceremonial sword here, a sentry's post there, and once, at a war memorial, a thing he should have known better than to lay a hand on at all. He had built a brand on the certainty that the solemn things of the world were only sets, and that the men who guarded them were only extras in his content. He had been right enough, often enough, to grow careless. And carelessness, in the presence of the line, is only ever a question of which gate you finally walk up to. He had walked up to mine. I was called to give an account. Not a trial yet, first the inquiry, the dull, careful machinery the house runs whenever a hand touches a weapon on a royal post, because the house takes such things with both hands and asks first whether its own man held the line before it asks anything of the man who crossed it. I want you to understand that. Before they so much as opened the file on the prankster, they opened one on me. Did the corporal give the warning? Did the corporal strike? Did the corporal control the weapon at every instant? Was the response precise and proportionate, or did the soldier reach past the line himself? That is not a betrayal. It is the opposite. It is the gate holding even its own to the standard, because a line that bends for the man defending it is not a line at all. I sat in a plain room across a plain table from an officer I respected and a clerk with a recorder, and I answered every question in the same flat voice I had given the prankster, because the truth needs no decoration. Yes, I gave the warning once as the orders require. No, I did not strike him, not with the rifle, not with my hands, not at all. Yes, I controlled the weapon at every instant. The muzzle never left the safe ground, the lock never failed, no round was ever in question, nothing left my hands for the length of a heartbeat. They had the flat-capped man's 93 seconds, and they had the gate's own camera, and they had 4 other recordings from 4 other angles that the crowd's phones had made, and every one of them said the same thing, frame for frame, because there was only ever one thing that had happened. The officer closed the file and looked at me for a moment, and then he said the only words of the whole inquiry that were not strictly procedure. 11 years on the gate, corporal, and not one mark against the post. It was not praise. We do not praise a man for holding a line. Holding the line is simply the job done. But it was a kind of acknowledgement. the kind that exists between men who both know exactly how much it costs to do a thing correctly when the whole world is watching and most of the world is wrong. I said nothing. There was nothing to add. The gate had held, and the inquiry had merely confirmed what the gate already knew. Then and only then, they turned to him. The charge, when it came, was not a joke and was never going to be one. Interfering with a serving member of the household guard in the execution of his duty, laying hands on a service weapon at a protected royal post. He had wanted the rifle for a photograph, and the photograph in the end was the most expensive picture he never took because the simple fact at the center of it, he reached for the gun, did not soften no matter how loudly his followers insisted it had all been in fun. The law does not have a clause for but it was a bit. It asks one question. Did your hand close on the weapon? His had. 2 million people had watched it close. There was no version of the morning in which it had not closed, and so there was no version of the morning in which the consequence did not follow. His defense, I am told, leaned hard on exactly the thing that had undone him, that he was an entertainer, that this was performance, that no reasonable person could have believed he meant harm, that he was being made an example of. And the answer the inquiry returned plainly was that performance is precisely why the line cannot move. A weapon does not become safe to grab because the man grabbing it is joking. A soldier cannot be expected to read a stranger's heart through a paper crown and decide, in the half-second a hand is closing on his rifle, whether the intent behind it is malice or content. The whole point of the line is that it does not require us to guess. The line is the same for the killer and the clown, because in the instant a hand closes on the barrel, the gate cannot tell them apart, and the gate is not permitted to be wrong. I think that was the thing that finally reached him. In the end, not the cuffs, not the charge, not even the 11 million views curdling into 11 million people who now knew his face for the wrong reason. It was the slow understanding, over the months it took the boring machinery to grind, that the world he had built his whole living on was not the world. He had believed the gun was a prop because in his world it had always been a prop. He had believed the guard was a statue because in his world every guard he had ever filmed had been a statue. He had believed the line was a suggestion because in his world no line had ever once held against him. And he had been right in his world, right up until the morning he walked out of it and up to mine, where the gun was a gun and the guard was a man and the line was the law, and none of the three had ever heard of him or cared in the slightest who his followers were. His sponsors, the ones who had paid him to test landmarks for laughs, were the first to go, quietly, the way money always leaves, with a statement about not condoning behavior of this nature. Then the platforms that had carried him took down the channel that had carried the cut 4-second lie, once the full 93 seconds had made the lie indefensible. By the time the matter was settled, a conviction, a fine he could afford and a record he could not erase, and an order that he come nowhere near a royal post again, the man who had crowned himself king of the forecourt had lost the only kingdom he had ever actually ruled, which was the attention of strangers, and he had lost it to the one thing he had been certain did not exist, a consequence that did not care how funny he was. I did not gloat. I want to be clear about that because it would be the easy ending and it would be a lie. I felt, when I heard the matter was closed, the same cold, clean relief I had felt on the cobbles. The arithmetic resolved, the shape of the world held steady. The line proved once more to be a line and not a suggestion. I felt no urge to crow over a man whose whole undoing had been to mistake a real gate for a stage. If anything, I felt the thing I always feel when I watch arrogance walk into the edge of the world, a kind of weary recognition. I have seen so many of them now. They are not monsters. They are men who were lucky for too long, who came to believe the luck was a law of nature, and who reached for the rifle of the world fully expecting it to come away in their hands like a toy. It never does. That is the only lesson, and it is the oldest one, and it cannot be taught, only learned the hard way at the gate where the line finally holds. And the line held because of men like Cole and Treller and young Sabine, who had moved the instant I touched the brass contact, and who had closed the space without a single shove, and who had walked a foolish man off the cobbles with more dignity than he had brought to them. It held because of the flat-capped man, who had filmed the whole of it not for sport, but because he understood in his bones that a true 93 seconds is worth more than 10,000 false 4-second clips. It held because the house opened a file on its own man first, and would not bend even for the soldier it would ultimately clear. The gate is never one man. It only looks like one man. That is the trick of it, and the strength of it, and the reason it will outlast every paced crown that ever climbs the cobbles to test it. I went back to the gate the next morning, and the morning after that, and the one after that. That is the part the 11 million views never see, because it is not a moment, it is a life, the going back. The prankster had his one morning and his cut clip, and his months of consequence, and then he was finished, the way they are always finished, a name that fades the moment the next one climbs the cobbles. But the gate was still there, and so was I, and so it would be long after both of us were gone, because the gate is older than any king who ever truly wore the crown, never mind one who bought his at a shop beside the snow globes. The world that came back to me was changed in the way the world always is after one of these mornings, which is to say it was changed for a week, and then it was exactly the same. For a few days the tourists looked at me differently, some with a new wariness, as though I might at any moment seize a rifle from a man's hands, and some with a new respect, as though I had done a brave thing rather than a correct one. I preferred neither. I want to be looked at the way you look at a gate, as a fixed thing, a thing you can trust to be where it is, a thing whose whole virtue is that it does not change to suit your mood. Wariness and worship are both just other people guessing at a man, and the gate does not require either. It requires only that the man behind it keep showing up, keep the line, and keep his eyes on the middle distance over the heads of the crowd. There was one morning, perhaps 3 weeks after, that I will keep, because it was the true ending of the thing even though no camera was there for it. A coach party came up the cobbles, the usual mix, and near the back walked an old man with a cane and a careful step, in a coat too heavy for the day, with the unmistakable bearing of a man who had once stood a post of his own a long time ago. He did not raise a phone. He did not cross the chain. He came as close as the chain allowed, and he stopped, and he looked at me for a long moment, not at the costume of me, the bearskin and the brass, but at the man, the way only another old soldier ever truly does. And then he did the thing that undid my composure more than any paste crown ever could, though I did not let it show, and I will deny it if you ask me. He came to attention. Slowly, with the cane taking some of the weight his hip would not, an old man on a public footpath squared his feet and straightened his spine and held himself, for 3 seconds, in the posture of a man on parade. And then he raised his hand and gave me a salute, not the sloppy wave the tourists give, but the real one, the slow, correct one, the one that means I know what it costs. I stood it too, and I see you standing it now. I am not permitted to return a salute from my post. The orders are clear, and I would not break them for the king himself, real or paste. But I gave him the only thing I am permitted to give, which is the thing I had given the prankster, and which means the precise opposite when given to a man like this. I held perfectly still, and I let the stillness say everything, and I am as certain as I am of anything that he understood it, because he gave the smallest nod, the nod of a man whose salute has been received though it could not be returned, and then he lowered his hand and took up his cane and walked on with the coach party and was gone. That is the salute I keep. Not the 11 million views that called me a thug, not the 11 million that turned and called me a hero, but the 3 seconds of an old man on a footpath who needed no clip and no caption, and no consequence to know exactly what he was looking at. The crowd guesses. The old soldier knows. And what he knew, what he had crossed a forecourt to tell me without a single word, was the only verdict that has ever weighed an ounce to me. The line held, and the man held the line, and that is the whole of the honor, and there is no other. People ask me when they find out what I do, whether it is hard to stand so still for so long while the world pushes at you. They mean the standing. They always mean the standing. And I tell them what I told you at the start, that the standing is the easy part, that the hard part is the watching, the long, patient arithmetic of a man who has trained himself not to react, but never to stop measuring. But there is one more part I have learned to add, on the far side of that morning with the king who was not a king, and it is this. The hardest part is not reacting when reacting would feel good. It is letting a man brush your medals and call you a statue and aim a curtain rod at your face and giving him nothing, because the gate does not exist to defend your pride. It is taking the cut 4-second lie without a word, because the gate does not exist to win the argument. It is sitting across a plain table while they open a file on you first, and answering every question flat and true, because the gate does not bend even for the man who holds it. The discipline people admire from the far side of the chain is not the stillness of a statue. It is the daily, deliberate, costly choice of a living man to be smaller than his own feelings, so that the thing he guards can be larger than any of them. The rifle is still on my shoulder. The line is still where it has always been, 3 feet of cobble and a brass chain, and 11 years of one man's boots worn pale into the stone. Tomorrow another coach party will come, and another after that, and somewhere in the years ahead another man will climb the cobbles certain that the gun is a prop, and the guard is a statue, and the line is a suggestion. And he will reach for the one thing I will never let a stranger touch, and he will find, as the king in the paste crown found, and as every one of them finds in the end, that the gate was never his to take. I will give him a warning once, low and level, the way the orders require. And then, if his hand closes on the rifle, the morning will quietly stop being his, and 2 of my own will begin to move from the corner of the forecourt where I will have clocked them the moment he came up the cobbles. And it will be over before the nearest phone has finished focusing, and no blow will be struck, and no one will be hurt, and the line will hold. Because that is what the line does. That is what we are for. Not to win and not to be liked, and not to take the crown a foolish man offers or the salute a wise one gives. Only to hold the shape of the world steady, one still man, on one worn stone, keeping faith with a thing older than any king, while the foolish find the edge of it, and the wise pass by, and the gate goes on being the gate, long after the costume has gone to the gutter and the crown has rolled away. I am Corporal Aldis Bren. I stand the card gate of Harrowmere House, and I have never once handed over my rifle for a photograph, and I never will, and that, not the standing, not the silence, not the bearskin or the brass, is the whole of the honor I was given to keep.